Not Ruth, Kate.
Are you online yet?
Who? I'm online.
Oh, all right. Yes, I can't.
So so anyway, we'll deal with any chit chat and questions and stuff. We've had a little bit of that anyway. Um, and thanks for getting the money over, Anne and Ruth. And we've just got to get something over from Kate. But anyway, so we're going to be looking at two standing stones that I visited.
So
And
you
one of these is going to be mentioned in a live show. So anyway, let's crack on. And as you can tell, different hairstyle, different look, because I'm playing a murderer this week.
oh, you
So
look less
yeah,
like a murderer now.
I look, I do look like a murderer. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, you look
Um,
less.
I look less like a murderer. I'm a sweet
Yeah.
murderer. I'm a nice murderer. Right. Anyway, right. So we're gonna go look at the images straight away, and we're gonna be looking at that guy later on. But we are going to be looking at a stone which is known as the Mine Clear Stone. Now, I visited the Mine Clear Stone, and I've also visited another site that is just down the road. Not that one. It's just down the road from the Mine Clear Stone, and it's a stone which has some Latin carving on it. But the
Oh,
stone that I we're going to be looking at first is the Mine Clear Stone.
mine.
Yes, somebody's spray painted it,
Oh,
and I know it looks funny, but it's not good.
I don't-
But anyway, the one thing about the Mine Clear Stone is it really is part of a rich tapestry of history near a place known as Ystrad Fallta. Um, and actually, it's a shortcut to get to West Wales. It's instead it saves me about 20 minutes by going this route, but I can't go this route in the winter months simply because the lane is flooded. If I break down, nobody's going to know where I am. And
the
the road is
waterfalls.
full of sheep
Is that
and
where the
so on.
waterfalls are?
Yeah,
The water.
the Ystrad Fallta waterfalls are in another direction, but this is on the way to Bridge. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and you can't.
Anyway,
Yeah, we went across the field, didn't we? We went across the shooting range.
you were is this the trip you were with me and we decided to ignore that there was a bicycle rally and we just decided to keep going down the road?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite good fun. I can't stand people who ride who dress up in spandex. It was quite fun having them very, very angry. But the fact of the matter is, I had to take you guys to look at some history and archaeology.
Oh,
That's exactly what I did that day. Anyway, so what we're going to do, the Mind Clear Stone itself, let's have another look at the view. The Mind Clear Stone itself is a stone that is just alone in the field. It's a massive stone and it sits in moorland today. But if you look about the landscape, it's full of mining activity, it's full of farming activity, and today it's just moorland, and nearby is a stream. Now, this stone itself is can be actually seen. When I pass it, when I'm driving down the road, it appears on my left or appears on my right, and the stone is a huge piece of old red sandstone. It's a massive piece of old red sandstone. It's whopping, right? And it's so impressive. Um, if you squint your eyes, it's 4 meters tall. The actual measurements are roughly about 3.7 meters, something like that, or whatever. And the dimension, the thickness itself is just under a meter thick, right? So it's something quite chunky, and it's nearly 3 meters wide, right? So it's a very interesting stone in that it's not just a slender, phallic looking
no.
um, upright stone. It's fat, it's squat, it's different, right? And
Oh,
obviously, I wanted to chuck this on there because it puts it into perspective a little bit because you've got the measure there. And what it is, probably it may have not have been high back in the past, because if you look, it's sort of in a little bit of a depression. So obviously, water's fallen off that and created more of a dip, right? But then again, it's eroded as well. So it really and there's a lot more hidden under the ground. So you look at this; it's distinctive. It's got a really interesting geometrical shape, and you do see it as something covered in moss today. And it's said if you look at it, it may actually be surrounded by, it may have actually been contained by some kind of mound. It may have actually been more or less encompassed by a mound back in the day. So therefore, only the top of it may have been seen. Whether that's true or not, there's that sort of indication there. So when you look at this stone, it's sort of looking side on, sort of looking side on. Um, and the sort of center line of this, it's sort of almost as if it is on a south-north alignment as you're looking at it, as you're looking at it. And it's all of this sense of total enigma. No, it's got a massive sense of enigma with it. Now, again, looking at this orientation, looking at the shape, obviously erosion, right? Um, could it could it be seen as being an instrument that could be read? You know, it looks quite an odd shape, right? Again, it's not straight, it's not slender, it's not round, it's slightly hexagonal looking. And interestingly enough, the that point on the top um, points directly celestial pole. So it's a celestial pointing pole. Whether that's mentioned, whether that's the way it's always been, because obviously it's been there for some time. Obviously, differences in orientations and north and true north and all the rest of it. That's another thing. So curiously, obviously, with the celestial pole, that sort of thing sticking out at the top, the point. This is much the same angle that can be found on the side slopes of the Great Pyramid of Giza. So you're thinking, all right, okay, but this stone itself could be very old indeed. Not just Bronze Age, but it may date maybe 5,000 years or maybe five and a half, 6,000 years. Again, it's in the middle of nowhere. Now, there's a link, sort of, a 20-degree link in a way between this mine clearstone and Lindow Man, which is obviously in Cheshire. And the link is that Lindow Man in Cheshire is in a very sort of is in a very lost landscape today, is in a very barren, sort of
Mm.
inaccessible, on the edge type of landscape, Lindow Moss. And this is definitely within that ilk. Now, then when you think about that, there was obviously a communication between this stone and the past. They saw the relevance of this locality, the relevance of this setting within the landscape. Now, has it got an astronomical relationship? Is it a memorial for somebody? What is it? That's the thing. What is it? But the thing is, what is something has changed over time, right? So it's a bit like, um, a metaphor. One minute somebody works in a bank, the next minute they're a TV star, the next minute they're a mum or a dad, the next minute they're um, they're a politician, right? And that is a good metaphor because this is a stone. It's been many things in its time, whether it's science, whether it's ceremonial, scientific. If it's been there since the Neolithic period, 6,000 years, its actual connection with the landscape has changed. So when you think of this stone, right, just take a step back a minute. When you think about this stone, right, maybe the stone as it was, as you're seeing it, back in the day, looked out at a very rich wooded landscape, right? Another period in time, it may have looked out a rich farming landscape. Trees came back, and then it looked out at a great mining landscape, right? Somewhere along the line, there's a trackway. Somewhere along there's a road. Somewhere along the line, it's got myths and legends, right? But like any piece of history, right, it juxtaposes with the moment of time it sits. So when we mentioned the other week about the amphitheatre of Culzean, one thing I didn't say last week when we looked at Culzean was that the Culzean amphitheatre should not be just seen as an amphitheatre. It may have been seen as something completely different in 500 years AD. It may have been seen um, as a place for meetings, and you can think of things like and people like King Arthur, maybe. But give or take all of that, give or take that sense of trying to understand this. In many ways, many of the answers to understanding this are probably correct, right? And for me today, when I park my car, because there's not really much in the way of car parking, but when I park my car today, it's like, oh, I'm going to go and see the stone. It's an interesting stone. I want to connect with it. I want to understand it. So that's the same as people having an understanding for the stone in the past. And I have a meaning for the stone in the past and how they connect with the stone in the past. All of these things, all of these questions and answers are usually right rather than wrong because
It
because
reminds me of a capstone. Is it too
which
small?
well, it's not too small for a capstone. In fact, the dimensions of this would be a little bit smaller than the stone at Tinkinswood Burial Chamber, but yeah, you're right. It's a capstone that's actually been placed
Upright.
vertically rather than
Yeah.
horizontally,
Mm.
right? So it's very interesting that you make that analogy. And what and when is a capstone and when is an upright stone, when is a singular stone, and how do you really understand these,
Could it have
you
been
know,
a
these
capstone? Could it have had what to call it, tomb there? Um,
yeah, exactly. You're actually you've been with me too long, Anne, for me to say that
I
that's
know.
completely incorrect. You so obviously thinking like that. So obviously take a step back again and you're thinking, right, okay. The notes tell you that it's a standing stone. The notes tell you that it's a standing stone that's been there for a long time. I'm telling you it's been used and seen for many different things over time. Maybe it could have been associated with a capstone, right? Um, or the sense of a capstone, which is actually vertical.
Yeah.
So the one thing that sticks you out, and trying to sort of get into the boots of people from the past, it's the same boots as when you leave the car and you go over and you want to understand it. Now this is one thing I used to do, which is a very good thing to do. What I used to do in the past, I used to take a group of people on a Friday, and I used to say, right, I've not read up about this site deliberately. And we would go there and we'd discuss it and we'd come up with wonderful things, right? And somebody would then go to a notice board and they said, oh, actually, the notice board tells you this. And I said, really? That's not why we've been here. We've come here to interpret it in our way, right? And one of the most sorriest moments I've ever had was that this was quite some time ago now. This was this was 10 years ago now. I was on a walk with actually two other people, and I was saying, let's have a look at this, let's have a look at that. And as we're looking at something, this person has an app on their phone and they say, actually, what you're looking at is this. And I'm thinking, yeah, but actually, no, we're not seeing that. We're seeing something else. Oh, yeah, but on my computer, it tells me you're seeing this. And I'm saying, can you put that away? Right. So, so again, many times when you see monuments like this, it sometimes hinders our interpretation and enjoyment. It's a popular tourist attraction. It's 60 meters away from a minor road that leads from the likes of Senny Bridge to Ystrad Vallta to the waterfall location. Um, and and again, you could think that there's more to this because there's other prehistoric bits and pieces within the landscape. Now, then this leads directly to another stone, which is in fact this stone, right? Which is actually the Mine Maddox stone, which actually lies 2 miles away to the south of the stone. Now, before we actually get to this stone, right, and we have a little look at it, right, this stone actually has writing on it. But at one point, the Mine Clear stone is very likely once had lighting on it as well. And it's reported that this stone had writing on it in the 1100s.
Oh,
And
Could be a gravestone.
it could be a gravestone, and then it's been used for something else. It's like it's like any of these things. You know, if somebody's used it as a marker, right, then people have forgotten why the marker's there. And then it's
Yeah.
thinking, oh, like that's aligned to do with this. Or the other thing as well is now this is quite a weird way of looking at this. Many people, when they're preparing for battles, would meet at something that people know about, right? So it's like in North Wales, there's a place known as the as the tree at the gate of the dead, right? It's known as the Croggan Oak, right? And interesting enough, we had a petition to actually we actually had a successful petition to try and protect the Croggan Oak. But it looks like the Welsh Assembly lost the paperwork, and
oh.
it's not really gone any further than that. But the thing is, the point is the reason why I've mentioned the Croggan Oak is that it was the place that the Welsh leaders used to meet when they used to go into battle against the English, right? And that's why the oak is important. And it was the place that they met in the mid 1100s to fight against the English king, and they won, right? The stone could have been the same thing, right? That people in the past met, right, to prepare for battle, and maybe a battle took place here, and therefore this then immediately becomes the memorial, right, for a battlefield.
Yeah.
The stone's already there, right? So it's thinking about all of that and putting all of this together. Now, usually what we see with this stone is there's a legend associated with the stone that the stone would go down to drink at the river Arfon Llŷr, and it would drink at the river, right? And this tale seems likely to be an allusion to the fact that its shadow is cast across the moorland as far as the beginning of the stream. Right, it's a stream that becomes a river, the river Llŷr. The head of the stream. That's what I was looking for, not the mouth, the head. And then it is said that it sets a shadow across the moorland as far as the river when the sun is low in the evening sky. Right, that is interesting. Again, it's interesting. So one of the things one of the things about these objects, they're not just stones, right? Immediately we've got it's along a south north axis.
Mm.
The point has got a connection to do with the celestial north, right? A shadow at one time of the year, it hits the head of the river, right? Um, it's it's set within a landscape that's extensively changed, right? And it's said that there is a point between April and September that this mine clear
Jeff,
stone,
Jeff wants to
a
come in.
plaster, right, actually hits the headstone, right? So I don't know who's just joined us. Have you let them in, Richard?
It's Jeff.
Yeah, I've let them in. Goff it is.
Goff.
Sorry,
Got
Julie.
it.
Yeah.
Didn't realise.
Let them, Jeff.
Yeah, Julie. I didn't she call you Jeff?
Yes.
Who the friggin' hell is Jeff?
I don't know. It's just like
I thought it was. Some
Look,
people spell their names with a Geof. It's Jeff.
Anne,
What?
can I carry on? Thank
Yes.
you. Right, yeah, good. Anne, don't mind me, right? You've got loads of time to talk. Just take it all night. It's fine. Don't mind the rest of us. Just keep talking. It's all right. Anyway, back to the mine clearstone. So when we think about this, when we look at prehistory, right? There's different meanings for different things, right? And you know, and something like this. And when you think about it, again, we go back and thinking this actually having a set of carving on it at one point in time, right? That also adds to its history as a book of history, right? So on the day that the sunset shadow reaches the stream for the first and last time of the year, right? Its sunrise shadow touches a stone 90 feet to the east. This only happens on that day, right? So in other words, there's this. It also touches another stone. So it acts within the landscape, a landscape of change. And
Yes,
one of the
it
things
must
that
be
needs to be
coming up to
respected
5:30.
with Anne, shut up. One thing that needs to be respected is that when these things are established, Anne, that the connection that they had in the past is still with us today, right? Because they still do the things that they did in the past that they do today, right? So there's good evidence to suggest that the alignments within the geometric arrangements also match astronomical alignments, principally involving all the major and minor lunar moments, right? But this hasn't been definitely proven or not. Now, it's a scheduled protected ancient monument, right? And I hope the likes of Henry and Goff like it when they come on, that they've got history already flowing. So we don't have to have a gander talking about Anne's washing machine. By the way, Anne, right? Near me, I don't know, they've got these on the side of the road. You can just chuck all your clothes in, sit there on your phone, right? Wash your clothes, tuck it in the back of the car, and drive off. So that's what we do down this end now. It's great fun. I just wanted to on the river. Yeah, shut up, you. Shut up. Who even asked for you? And I gotta be honest with you, right? Why is a certain relative of yours only having one tour of a certain country? Right. I thought he was there for. He hasn't been there for 2 years, has he, Henry?
He's done three.
I thought he just done 1 year. Has
No,
he
he's
gone
done,
that quick?
done 3 years.
It's gone that quick.
Yeah, it's gone that quick. And
I
there's
remember when
been
you told me.
lots of postal deliveries have been made.
Bloody hell! But anyway, so I want to link this with the other stones. So one thing talking about memorials within the landscape is this other stone, right? This is a Roman era stone, right? And one thing that we got to respect is when we think about the context of this stone, which is 2 miles away from this stone at Ustrasglatter, and this is obviously to the south of it. So what you're seeing is something that they saw in the medieval period, which is something that they saw in the Roman period, which is something that they saw in the Iron Age, all the way down to the Neolithic period, right? So this stone is very likely to have been a stone that may have just existed without the Roman carvings on, right? But there are naturally Roman carvings on it. I absolutely loved visiting this stone because I can remember that the first thing I did, right, Ruth, you're gonna love this, right? The first thing I did was to
Is it?
find some, yeah, kiss it, yeah, I did. And shut up, don't give away my secrets, right? The first thing I did, right, was to kiss it, and next, what I then did, right, was to find some sheep shit, right, and I rolled it over the stone, right, and it filled the grooves, right, and as I'm pointing things out, I says, "Oh, I'll have a little break now," right. So Michelle gave me some sandwiches, and I forgot I hadn't cleaned my hands, and the sandwiches tasted very strange, right? Anyway, so,
Oh, well, it's only grass. They only eat grass.
can you remember that story I used to tell people in my classes? We're gonna read this now. You remember that story I used to tell people in my classes that in the 1980s that there was a craze in Australia to actually eat cow pats.
Oh, no.
There was, honestly, straight up.
Oh,
So it makes me eat my
You
sandwiches.
Want to hear what most people eat? Blech.
Shut up. So this stone itself, whether it was already there or whether it's placed there in the Roman period, it's obviously got some lettering on it, and the lettering is there's a D the wrong way around, there's an E, there's an R, there's a V, there's an upside down A because they're obviously Irish. And basically you've got the one Phyllis, and then you've got the next line, right? You've got it's very difficult to see, but you've got the next line, which is he, ye, ac, kit,
See,
right? And then before that, you've got I, V, S, T, I. And basically, right? Basically, that means of Dervacus, which is on the top line, son Philus of Justus, and basically hic iacit. So basically, the translation is the Dervacus, son of Justus, lies here, and this is the memorial.
oh.
Right. So it's very, very interesting that we think about that. And then we basically mentioned the other stone at Mine Clear, obviously our prehistoric stone. And we're thinking of this being a stone that's got a name on it and clearly telling us that somebody's buried there. But when you think about it, whether this was placed there in the Roman period, of the Iron Age, or the Bronze Age, right, we know that this stone had been there for maybe 5,000 or 6,000 years, right? So the one interesting thing about this stone itself, the stone of Mine Maddock, mine meaning stone, and mine, M-A-E-N, meaning stone with carving. So therefore, the Mine Clear stone means the stone with carving next to the river of Clear, right? So basically, this stone means the stone of carving of Maddock, who in fact turns out to be Devacus. Don't go there. Let's just not do that. So, what we've got.
Your sound is going like wavery.
Is it waving? Ruth, is my sound waving? Are you getting a full phallic endulisms of me talking?
it's clear this end.
Oh,
Right,
right.
Anne, it's you. Anne, it's
It's
you.
probably
Oh,
I've
Anne,
got.
what
I'm
it
too
was.
far away.
Yeah,
don't worry
I
about it.
agree.
Get over. What?
He's not far enough away. That's the problem.
Shut up, man. Shut up. Shut up. Don't- Oh, God, everyone stop. I tell you what, why don't we just have Goff ganging up on me? Goff wouldn't gang up on me because he's got deep respect for me. He loves me deeply, and he's even buys me Madeira cake when he goes to Tenerife. Right. So this stone itself, you got some nice stones in the base. The stone was first recorded in 1805, right? And in 1805, it was recumbent. It was lying on the ground, so it was re-erected. It was made erect sometime in the 1800s. It was excavated. Excavations undertaken at the time showed that the stone had previously been been sited at the edge of or near to the siting or alignment of a Roman trackway or a Roman road. Right? They didn't find any human remains there, but what we do this is naturally a scheduled ancient monument, and it's within the landscape of history and landscape of the past. So what we are going to do now, we're going to get straight naked, right? And I will tell everybody a secret. Ruth actually went naked when she did a ride around the Vale of Morgan, right? And I thought I'd add that in there. And we forgot that Richard's with us as well. A good old Rich, right? Good old Dick. And Henry sent me. Yeah, I do read your messages, Henry, right? By the way, interestingly enough, I don't know what it was, and I'm not including it this week, but I remember going through a load of paperwork the other day, right? And it was quite spooky because there was an old press release on the Vasa with some really nice photographs. And then the next minute, I looked at my phone, and guess who should send me photographs of the Vasa? Henry. Very spooky stuff. So Henry sent me this message, right? He goes on to say, if I don't make tonight, I have this for you. Drum roll. And I
Oh,
think I've mentioned this before, because Henry actually does his homework. He's a good boy. Treasure from the Bronze Age has been put on display in a museum following a local fundraising effort to keep the hoard. More than 50 artifacts from about 3,000 years ago are being exhibited at Ceredigion Museum, Aberystwyth, after they were found by metal detectors in 2020 near Aberystwyth or 20 miles away. These include tools, weapons, body ornaments, a very rare statue of Lloyd George, and the artifacts were of Bronze Age date, and they awarded the detectorists £4,200 for their discovering the find and declaring them. Right, so I thought I'd mention that. So what we're going to do tonight, we're going to be looking at Lindow Man, and we're going to be looking at a mirror. Or are we going to be looking at two mirrors? So we've definitely got Iron Age stuff tonight, but we've got something to sort of put in there. I will be visiting the Carmarthen Museum soon to visit some gold, but I haven't actually had an email back to tell me when that's going to be. It's Roman or Iron Age gold from Pim Saint. That is in their archives at this minute. So, right, okay. So what I'd like to do now, I would like to crack on to the images. And I understand that Judith will be joining us. So, Richard, look out for Judith and maybe anybody else who's going to join us as well. So what I'm thinking of doing, we'll do some spiel about Lindow Man, and then we'll take a break. So let's get to it. So interesting enough, I did the lecture different last night. It seemed to work, but I thought I'm not going to do that again tonight. So what I did last night when we did Lindow Man Part 2, I basically went on to a Google, and I basically said, let's look at the Google images, but they weren't actually as good as these images that I've got for us tonight. Now, yes, it does look like it does look like beef jerky, but I can assure you that that is actually the head of a gentleman, right? And if you see a wound in the cranium, yes, you can see a wound in the cranium, right? So we're going to be looking at Lindow Man. So what I might do, as I did last night, I basically went over a little bit about the week before, just to sort of, but I didn't do it in full. And the stuff that I didn't do was looking at this thing that they originally thought it was a murder victim, and I thought, right, okay, let's just let's not repeat a lot of that because we did it last week. But there's John Lennon with the glasses. So Lindow Man is one of up to 4 bodies found at Lindow Moss, and he's known as Pete Marsh. Now, what we need to do, we need to work out where the bloody hell Lindow Moss is again. Right, some nice little images. And there is Lindow Moss. Lindow Man, Lindow Moss, surreal landscape, feeling remote even. Lovely area to walk and explore near Wimslow. So Lindow Man is one of those great anomalies, and is actually part of my life, because I can remember seeing him in a display cabinet in the British Museum. I think when he went then, right, in 1986, because his body was discovered in 1984 after Lindow Woman was discovered in 1983, and more remains have been found in 1987. So you've got Lindow 1, Lindow 2, Lindow 3, or Lindow 4.5, or maybe Lindow 4 is actually part of Lindow 2, who's actually Lindow Man, who's Pete Marsh, Pete Bog. But I remember saying last week that one of the things that we do know is that, and this was this I was picked up on this. I was picked up on this last night. Basically, it's not completely a bog body, because there's skeletal remains there, right? Usually when a body's placed in a bog, right, the body itself, the acids eat away at the bone, meaning that all we've got left is the leathery tanned flesh, right? But in this case, what we have is bones. So we've got a part of a bog skeleton, but the rest of it is a bog body. And where the bog body is, there's no bone, right? Because the acids. So what's happened with this body, right? You can think about this. The body's been placed in the bog, right? But it was slightly exposed for a little time, right? And what that meant is that the acids ate away the other acids, and the oxygen, right, ate away the flesh, right, because it was exposed. There was oxygen and acids eaten away, right, but the rest of the body was in the bog in anaerobic conditions where there's no oxygen and different acids. Now, I worked out yesterday, right, that the acids in Lindow Moss are perfect acids to create whiskey. Ooh. Right? So in other words, when you're drinking whiskey, right, because I know Henry's a whiskey drinker because he doesn't add water to his whiskey. Henry, I've been doing my research, right? And basically that whiskey may have been filtered through bog bodies, right? So there you go.
On it that fell in hole.
Well, actually, this is one of the things. So one of the things that we know about these bog bodies, and we'll be looking at Talon Man in a few weeks' time. We'll be looking at some more bog bodies in Ireland as well. So, but one thing about these bog bodies, right, is that some of them may have been murder victims In this case, he was slightly murdered, but then he wasn't, but then he was, and then he wasn't, and he was brought back to life again, and he was murdered again, right? So basically, the process of this is to expose people to death and bring them back to life, right?
Cold death.
So it's cheating death. Basically, it's like it's like when you have when you use when you use deadly nightshade, right, or henbane, to slow down um the blood, right, and basically it'll, if you have too much, it'll kill you, right? It's basically to slow things down, right? And basically and then you would add other chemicals into your blood system, right, to get things going again, right? But this is actuality. What they're doing in this, um, they're using different processes with Lindow man to give him life and to give him death, right? Now, I one of the things that I've actually got on my in my will, right, is that there are instructions for my children to take me to Switzerland for me to take a lethal dose, right? Some in British law, people might turn around and say that that's actually illegal, right? In Switzerland, it's not. But the fact of the matter is, the reason why I use that as a metaphor, and actually that is for real, the reason why I use it as a metaphor as well, is that define what murder is, right? Define what suicide is. Define what assisted murder is, right? Or assisted suicide. Because this guy was actually ill, right? He may have been in his 20s, but he was actually ill, right? He may have asked for death. He was also in pain. He may have asked for death. So is that murder, right? So some of these bodies are in fact accidental additions to bogs, right? They've strayed into bogs and become swallowed up, right? You know, other individuals have been murdered, and so on and so on. So there's you can look at this in many different ways. But the one thing about understanding these bog bodies, you know, the evidence for these bog bodies is continually being reinterpreted, right? So, you know, sorry, had a technology malfunction there. So looking at this bog body is continually being reinterpreted, and as we go through it, I will tell you what the reinterpretations are, so I'm not repeating myself, right? So anyway, cracking on to our man again. So again, just a little bit more about last week. He was a healthy. He looked healthy, but there were things definitely wrong with him, right? He was health. He had a high social status. Again, he may have died in his late 20s. He may have died at the time of the birth of Jesus Christ. He may have died 100 years after the birth of Jesus Christ. There's signs that he wasn't exposed to major physical labor throughout his lifetime, right? But most of the evidence, again, most brackets, apostrophes, tell us that he had a violent death. There's debate over that. Ritualistic death, suicidal death, and so on and so on. So there's different ways of looking at this body. When it was recovered, the body was preserved by being freeze dried, right? And we'll talk about that process. And occasionally he travels from the British Museum to Manchester, right? So let's look at some of the details that we certainly didn't do last week, right? So again, some really interesting details as well about this individual. So preservation of the bog bodies is dependent on a set of specific physical conditions, right? So looking where it says the where it sort of says the M58. If you go up by the coast there, If you can remember, a few years ago, we looked at some footprints, right, that had been found in the mud. And if you can remember that lecture, I told you that the chances of these footprints being found and preserved are probably millions to one, right? And it's the same when we talk about bog bodies. Okay, let's just calm this down a bit. So you've got somebody who's ending up in a bog, right? Let's say it as crude as that. Somebody ending up in a bog, right? The person ending up in the bog, and the people around causing the death or placing the body in the bog or whatever, right? Doesn't know whether the body's still going to be around in 1,000 years' time, let alone 100 years' time, right? So what we're saying is lots of bogs across Ireland and the low hillside bogs in England and in other areas, right? It's likely at one stage thousands of people had been placed or become lost in bogs, right? But it's only hundreds are left with us as pieces of archaeological evidence. And as lots of these bogs are being drained, right? And here we go, as lots of these bogs are being drained, right? The chances of finding more of these artifacts is diminishing. We've got Rob online. He said to pass his love on to Anne. And basically, Rob was actually asked online about the Mine Clear stone. I'm going to mention this quickly. Where did the stone come from? It's very likely that the stone may have actually been associated with glacial movement, but that's something else. Anyway, back to Lindow Moss. So the Smagman moss bogs, the factors for preserving a human body are probably several million to one. So Lindow man and what's left of him, the chances of that are very, very remote, but they have remained with us. So when the body's placed into the bog or has accidentally ended up in the bog, right, the temperature when the body's placed into the bog needs to be 4 degrees C at the deposition of the body, except the body wasn't completely at 4 degrees C because part of the body was eaten away. So that's an interesting point. The subsequent average annual temperature must be lower than 10 degrees C, right? So the average temperature needs to be lower than 10 degrees C. Anything above that, then the reactivities, the oxygens are going to get into the sphagnum moss and they're going to eat things out. So basically, the landscape, the moisture levels must remain stable all year round. So the boggy landscape can't dry out. Sphagnum moss affects the chemistry of nearby water, which becomes highly acidic at roughly 3.3 to 4.5. Now, your best whiskey is roughly about 3.5, going a little bit over 4.5. So basically, the body that the boggy landscape and the water drained from that is perfect for making whiskey, right? So the concentration of dissolved minerals also tends to be low, right? So obviously dissolved minerals are also the dissolved minerals from calcium associated with the bone. So the other thing as well is this is another thing, right? So if there's several bog bodies being placed together in the bog at the same time, it's unlikely they would survive. End of. But as Henry knows from the Emerald Isle, right, that there are lots of bog bodies, right? But undoubtedly they've been placed into the bogs at different periods over time. You can get bog butter, bog cheese, you can get bog iron and all sorts of things, right? But these are all based on factors. And so what the sphagnum moss itself is, it basically dies, right? And the function of its dying, creating layers of sediment, these are then placed into the bog in a situation, right, that is compacted away from oxygen. Usually the moss itself would turn into sugars and humic acids rather than the acids in bog. But before that happens, right, or after that's happened, they're trapped in layers, which is anaerobic, which means that there's no oxygen, which means that the oxygen is not going to eat away at the flesh. The acids eat away at the calcium of the bone instead. As a result, human tissues buried in the bog tend to tan rather than decay. Right.
Oh,
Now, the one rather interesting thing last week is that I'm just going to paraphrase this. It's funny, but it's serious, right? So you can imagine, right? And I'm just going to paraphrase this because we did this in full last week. I don't want to do it again. On the 13th of May, 1983, right? There it is. Lindow 1 was found, right? Lindow 1. This is in that part of the peat bog, right? And when good old Andy Mould and Stephen Dooley noticed there was a head come out in the elevator, they picked it out and chucked this thing around as if it was a football. They didn't know it was a head at the time. They actually thought it was a giant dinosaur egg. As they kicked the head around, right, they realized there was actually a human head where there was one eye protruding from its eye socket with some hair intact. Right.
wow.
I don't know if you've ever seen the film The Man Who Would Be King, right?
Mm.
And in that film in Afghanistan, defeated enemy leaders' heads are cut off and they then use it as a football. Think of that film, except they're kicking the head around, right? And then they realize it's a human head, right? So basically, long story short, there was a woman that went missing in 1959. It was Malika, who her husband was Peter Rembrandt. He had been bragging that that he had murdered his wife in prison. So when the police said, actually, we found a head, we think it might be your wife's head, right? It was a long cold case, 1959. This is 1984. He basically said, "Oh, it's my wife's head." And they said, right, they charged him with murder there and then. But unfortunately, it didn't turn out to be his wife's head at all. It turned
Oh,
out to be a woman that was 2,000 years old.
oh,
So the moral of the story is, Goff, right? All those bodies that you've put into the peat bog, right? Make sure the police do the testing before you admit to murdering someone, right? Because now he admitted that he did actually murder his wife, but it wasn't his wife's skull, right?
oh, yes.
And strangely enough, they actually when eventually they found eventually look, Guy looks really odd. It gives it a sense
Yeah,
of
he looks
scale.
like his eyes popping out.
Exactly. That guy's looking at the cabinet. There it is, right? And it's not in mud. It's like in sort of synthetic, sort of rubbery type stuff, right? Oh, and I realised today that if I've got synthetic rubber buckets with my animal feed in, right, the animal feed doesn't rot. But when I got my animal feed in plastic buckets, right, the food rots. Hence
Oh.
why it's rubber pellets.
Oh,
So interesting. This is how it goes, right? So a year later, after he's admitted to killing his wife, but they still haven't found the body, right? On the 1st of August, Andy Mould, right? They find this guy's leg, right? And let's get the guy's leg. Oh my God, we haven't got a photograph of the guy's leg. We had the guy's leg last night. Anyway, there's a leg there somewhere. You can find it on the internet. They found a guy's leg, right? And Eddie Slack, right, threw Pete Marsh's leg at Andy Mould, only to turn out there was actually a leg of a human being, right? So then they went to the prison to have a word with this guy Peter and said, "Do you recognize this leg?" And he said, "Yeah, it's my wife's leg," right? But it wasn't his wife's leg. It was actually belonging to Pete Marsh or Pete Bog, right? So in other words, right? They only found out the guy admitted it was his wife's leg, right? He must have thought so little of his wife. But anyway, unfortunately, the skin started to decompose almost instantly, right? So it needed to be placed to Macclesfield District General Hospital, right? And then they found the rest of the body, and they showed Pete, the guy, Pete Ryan Brout, and he said, "Yeah, that looks like my wife." It wasn't. It was a bloke, right? And I don't know. I don't know. He must have had serious mental bloody health.
Complex.
Yeah, guilt complex. It's my wife. Look at that arm. I remember touching that arm and being with my wife. With a blow to the back of the head. That's how I murdered her. And it wasn't. It was actually Pete Marsh. Right. So they only actually found out on the 21st of August that it was actually Pete Bog. And it was and basically, I remember saying last week, if you go onto the internet and you go onto YouTube, there's an episode of QED, Q.E.D, QED, right? And it's actually a 1985 BBC Lindow Man broadcast, right, which you can actually find on there, right? So anyway, long story short, right? So what we need to do, we need to go back to this little plan. So there it is. So Lindow 1, there it is in the middle, right? Lindow, and you got Lindow 2. So Lindow 1 was found first, which is the woman, 1983, right? And then Lindow Man found 1st of August 1984, right? Lindow 1 was just the skull. Lindow 2, which is Pete Marsh, 1984, August the 1st, right? They basically it was the skull and bits of the body, right? So Lindow 3 was actually another body, right, which was actually a headless body, right? Now, yeah, okay, but the thing is, when you look at this, right, it's very there's bits of body spread out, right? Bits of body spread out, and it's when you think about this, maybe bodies were cut up in life. Now, as much as you've been believing everything that I've said, let's question something that I've said to you, right? And what we're going to do, we're going to question one little fact, right? So one little fact, right? So when we go into explaining how the person was killed and what happened, right? Then we go into the science, which has re-examined some of the evidence and said, actually, some of the damage caused to the body was caused after death, right? And some of the damage to the body may have been caused with the body swelling. And then basically they stab the body, they release the gases, and the body goes back into the bog again, right? Can you see where we're going with this?
Yeah.
We're actually going to go even further. When we look at the bodies found at Cadle Hallen on the island of Uist, the bodies that had been placed into a bog, and then they'd been mummified, and they'd been left around the house for decades. And in fact, the body kept being dug up, and they kept on having the body in their lives, right? When you think about some of the Caribbean islands, the sense of the Day of the Dead, you've all heard about that festivity, right? Where they dig up loved ones and they talk to them, right? Well, actually, I was reading. I was reading well, no, this was, I think, Goff may have got this as well. Because me and Goff listened to the same stuff. There was a Radio 4, I think it was 4 program, not Radio 4 Plus. And in I think it was in Highgate Cemetery in London, there was this woman. She used to visit her husband every single day in the crypt. She used to have his body brought out of the crypt, right? And she used to change his shirt every day, right? She used to put a new shirt on her husband every single day, right?
Oh,
And the reason why I'm mentioning that is that this idea about having this person within our lives, right? There's some examples, right? Think about this as well. Again, I'm thinking about trying to do is I'm trying to expand your mind, because when I was in school, we had this in school. It was like the body was stabbed, murdered, all the rest of it, all these things. But now we're starting to question some of the science and the actual evidence, right? And maybe this guy didn't have the the difficult death that it's made out to be. Some of the garrotting around the neck indicates something else, right? So we're looking at all this evidence, and we're seeing that some of the evidence points in different directions, and maybe the person was so loved that the person wanted their life ended for whatever reason, and we've got some evidence towards that reason, right? And then maybe they were brought out, placed into the bog again, right? Maybe the body floated to the surface. They stabbed the body. Gas was brought out. They. But what we have, and you can just about see it. There was only one piece of clothing on the body, right? And it's basically an armband. Did you know that was there? So when you go when you see the body in the cabinet in the British Museum, look out for the armband, because it's still there, right? Which I think is absolutely brilliant. With all due respect, there's issues about the body, and is it good to see the body in the cabinet, and so on and so on, right? So what we then do, nice bit of reconstruction there. And to be honest with you, he looks like Ian Brady, the Moors murderer. But that I didn't say that last night. But anyway, so what we have as well is that we found body 1, body 2, and there's body 3. And they found also Lindow 4, right? Which was the upper thigh, right? And Lindow 4 itself isn't marked on here. But unfortunately, the upper thigh hasn't been added to Lindow 2 at the cabinet in the British Museum, which I think is quite weird, which is in fact against the rules of the Ministry of Justice, right? And can I explain a little bit about that? When we exhumed a body on the South Wales coast, near Monknash, right? When they were filming Britannia, right? This must have been in 2015, 16, right? I had a phone call of the Ministry of Justice. The phone call of the Ministry of Justice was this woman. She said, I believe you exhumed a body without a license. And I said, it was an emergency exhumation. And she said, right, we'll give you retrospective exhumation license for the body. So we were chatting away on the phone. She said, right, you're obviously dealing with this body. Yeah, that's fair enough. And then she said, have you got all the bones? And I said, no. She said, what do you mean you haven't got all the bones? And I said, oh, the skull ended up with South Wales Police. And the woman said, why did you allow the police to have the skull? And then she said, why have the police got the skull? And I said, oh, because this guy went on the coast with a mattock, smashed up the skull with a mattock. And then the woman said, you allowed the man to smash the body up? No, I said, I'm an archaeologist. I wouldn't allow that to happen. And she said, the reason why the police has got the skull is because they stopped the individual smashing the skull up with a mattock, right? And the woman said, right, why haven't you got the skull then? And I said, well, I don't have the authority. And she said, right, I've got the authority to get the skull off the police, right? And she said, right, we've got to unite the skull with the body. Anyway, I had a phone call the next day. There was a woman involved in the project called Mandy, and the police knocked Mandy's door, and she said, Mandy, here's an evidence bag with bits of human skull. Mr. Langford will know what to do with it, because I've been ordered by the Ministry of Justice to release these human bones to Mr. Langford at the earliest opportunity, right? So I mentioned that story because I'm a bit wary why why the rest of the body isn't in the cabinet in the British Museum. I don't know why that is. Anyway, altogether, we're left with Lindow 3 up to 70 bits of Lindow 3, right? Including bits of skin, 70 bits, right? Lindow 3. Nobody talks about Lindow 3. They don't really talk about Lindow 1, the head, right? So basically, the other bits of Lindow 2, which is classed as Lindow 4, which again gets confusion, is the left leg and buttocks, right, which were found on the elevator as they're cutting peat, right? So nothing more has been found there associated with these bodies since September 1987. And when we think about all this and the bits of Lindow 4, i.e. Relating to Lindow 2, were found very close to Lindow 2. But it's rather interesting. You've got all these bodies spread over this big area. So what we've got next is the investigation, the cause of death, and the hypothesis. Right. So what? Look, hang on a minute. Shut up, duck. Right. Look, I know you want some food, but you can have some in a minute. Right. So shut up. Right. Anyway, cracking on. The duck's outside the window asking for its food. It's not having any food. Right. Anyway, cracking on. Shut up, duck. Right. Okay. Here we go. So the remains and investigations. So the sets of human remains, the body itself, are some of the best human remains that have been found in Britain. And before Henry jumps in and says, does that include Ireland? No, because some of the remains in Ireland are very, very well preserved as well. But they're not the best in Europe. Tolland Man, which we'll be doing in another lecture, Tolland Man from Denmark, the remains there are absolutely unbelievable, with the cap on the guy's head, right? So again, we'll be looking at Tolland Man again. So before Lindow Man was found, it was this was in 1984, right? So get the sequence. We knew of 41 bog bodies that had been found in England and Wales and 15 in Scotland. And that was over a long period of time. So that basically somebody did more research and actually found out that there wasn't just 41 bog bodies that had been found in Britain, there were actually 85. And in fact, not 15 bodies that had been found in Scotland, but 36, right? And a bloody hell of a lot more in Ireland, right? So the interest in bog bodies was massive. And in fact, people have been recording bog bodies in Britain since the 1600s. Now, actually, bodies were probably not reported before the 1600s. One, because records weren't brilliant. And secondly, most people who had crofting cottages, or most people near marshy boglands, right, had it in their deeds that they could cut peat for fuel, right? So instead of collecting wood from a woodland, right, they could collect peat, right? So people probably burnt this stuff, right? And human flesh burns extremely well, right? As was found out in experiments in the Second World War. But I just wanted to mention that if you're peat cutting and you haven't got much in the way of heat, you're going to burn those human remains, right? So what do we know about Lindow Man? What are the facts? So Lindow Man would have measured roughly just under 5'8" which is basically my height, right? He weighed 60 kilograms, and he died in his late 20s, right? So what we do know, and he did look a little bit like this, and what we do know, and you can actually see hair on his head and under his chin, and he's got a moustache, right? We do know, and he's got sideburns, by the way. Can you see his sideburns? That's good. He's got sideburns. There you go. Sideburns there. So what we do know is, so he's got a trimmed beard, a moustache, and sideburns. And he had brown hair. So he's not a red bimbo like you, Anne. As well as healthy teeth with no visible cavities. He had manicured fingernails for the hand that we've got, indicating he did little heavy or rough work. But I'm going to jump in there, right? And the reason why I'm going to jump in there is that we do know from Scandinavian society that if people had disabilities or mental disabilities, they were cared for in society. They did not need to do manual work, right? So, and I've got to be very careful not to upset or insult anybody, right? But when we use the derogatory term today, that person's got special needs, right? In prehistory, that person had special needs and they were looked after in society. And it was not a derogatory, it wouldn't have been a derogatory term. We see this in Scandinavian society. Maybe the reason why this person didn't do rough work was because the person was special, right? And that armband, if we go on to the armband as well, right? Where did we see the armband? And there we go. We can see the armband there as well. It's a fox fur armband, right? So even though you could say that on the surface he was relatively healthy, right? He was not healthy at all, right? The textbooks will say he was healthy, but when the notes also tell us that he had slight osteoarthritis, well, when you say slight osteoarthritis, it may be in a lot of pain, right? He also had constant stomach aches, right? Because he had an infestation of whipworm and mowworm, right? No, not the mowworm virus that you get on the computer, but mowworm. So he would have had constant stomach aches. And naturally, when he passes, the eggs are going to come out in his stools, and that's going to infect other people. But anyway, as a result of decalcification, the bones and pressure from the peat under which Lindow Man was buried meant that his head was distorted. So basically, decalcification, in other words, the acid's eaten away at his skull. So therefore, it's become very, very distorted. Hang on. Let's go back where we just had the head, didn't we? We had his head become very, very distorted. Right, now the problem is taking DNA from the body. While some preserved human remains may contain DNA, right? DNA principally is going to come from the bone, right? And if the bone's been eaten away by acid or contaminated with acid, you're not going to be able to get DNA. So you can get DNA from maybe associated with the teeth, the enamel, but you're not going to get it from the flesh because the flesh has been tanned. It's been corrupted by the acids. And when acids corrupt things, they really corrupt things. It's not helpful. So Lindow Man and Lindow 3 were found to have elevated levels of copper on their skin. Right now, I know something about this. I've been taking that silver supplement recently, right? And I've only started to that silver stuff that I've been having that regularly, and I've had to stop taking it because my skin color is starting to go blue, right? So if you, and I won't be able to get rid of the color either, but colloquial silver, that's the one. So basically, his skin, right, has copper staining, right? Now, is the copper staining associated with copper contamination in water? Is the copper staining associated with some kind of link with metallurgy? Or is the copper staining associated with tattoos? Right. So the cause for this was uncertain, as there could have been natural causes. Right. But there might be something quite simple, that maybe his body was stained with a copper oxide paint, right? and we know that on certain parts of his body, the copper oxide is more prevalent than other parts of his body. It was found that the copper content of the skin or the torso was higher than other areas of the body. So, you know, it's ambiguous to whether it's environmental factors, work factors that we've got copper stain on his body, but it might actually be deliberate. So if we go back to another topic that we're actually doing in the live shows next year, right? Don't forget to get your tickets, guys. We're looking at the Lady of Pavlan Cave. Now, if you look at the Lady of Pavlan Cave, the copper staining is directly on the bones, right? So that means if the copper staining directly on the bones, then the body was in a skeletal form before the not the copper, no, sorry, I've used the wrong word. The iron oxides, sorry. I jumped a bit. So we got the Lady of Pavlan Cave, the iron oxides, and basically the iron oxides are staining the body to look red, right? Not copper. Sorry, I went ahead of myself. But it's the same process. We've got copper with this guy, Lady of Pavlan Cave. But it's quite possible that the iron oxides with the bones, Lady of Pavlan Cave, were added after the body was in skeletal form. Hence why the Pavlan Cave is forgery, right? Put together by Reverend Buckland. The body may be old, but you know the oxide's been added later. So you know, pigment staining is not new, is not unknown, right? There may have actually been copper oxides within the actual bog itself, but you know we need to do more research on that. So dating the body, so when do we think the body dates from? Some say 300 years BC, others say around the birth of Christ, or maybe up to around 100 years AD, but it's definitely an Iron Age body anyway, right? If the body has been treated in the way that it's treated, it's undoubtedly Iron Age, because Roman sacrifice was made outlawed in Roman era Britain, and as Lindow Moss by about AD 60 had been overtaken by the Roman administration, and the Roman fort at Chester wasn't too far off, right? You can see where we're going with this. So it's definitely an Iron Age body. Now, although the body may have been disturbed back in the day, it obviously wasn't disturbed up until the peat cutters actually got there, our friend Mr. Mould. And obviously peeling back, the one problem is with peat bogs is there's no real stratigraphy. It's all mixed up stuff. Well, you could get an idea of stratigraphy, but it's all sort of compacted to create one sort of peat boggy block. So Lindow's and now, so right, okay. So if we remember the next bit when we do the cause of death, right, it will be helpful. So there's evidence of his diet being a mixture of bread, mistletoe, and burnt bread, and so on. So I can remember somebody saying to me, when you've got an upset stomach, eat burnt bread, right? So with that in mind, Lindow Man's last meal was preserved in his stomach and intestines and was analysed in some detail. It was hoped that investigations into the contents of the stomach would shed light on the contemporary diet, as was the case at Grobalt Man and Tulland Man in 1950. The analysis of the contents of the digestive system of bog bodies had become one of the principal endeavours of investigating such remains. And we don't just get bog bodies of men, women, we get bog bodies of couples of men and couples of man and woman, right? We can get multiple burials, but that's if they're buried at the same time and there's certain conditions, and we've done all that, right? We know that he ate mostly cereals, right? And obviously not as balanced as he should have been. So what we've got, we know that one of his last meals was actually charred bread. The charred bread may have lots of significances, but the charred bread would indicate that at the time of close to the time of death, he had an upset stomach because of the worms that were in his dietary tract. It makes perfect sense. Some mistletoe pollen was also found in the stomach, indicating that he died roughly towards the end of March, because mistletoe pollen, that's when that's available. We'll have a break soon as well. One of the conclusions of the study was that the people buried in Lindow moss may have had a less varied diet than their European counterparts. Or is this something that was deliberate, that he had to eat that diet? Or maybe he was a special person and he would eat grain as part of that special diet. And you know, when we look at archaeology, it's always to be wary and to try to understand more of the surrounding landscape and more of the detail before we can ever hope to get to any kind of conclusion. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a break now. So I have been on for an hour and 32 minutes without a break. So I need a round of applause. And yeah, yes. I was in a big film on Thursday, right? And it was very odd. I had a round of applause by all the actors and the film crew, but not the extras, which was quite disconcerting. Anyway, so we're going to take a break now. Enough. Sorry. Oh right, Henry's left us.
Henry?
Henry had to go
Oh.
because he had to pick up his son.
Oh, where's his son? In Southampton?
Well, he's just come back from tour. He's been on tour in Ghana. Anyway, right, we're going to take a break now. So anything from you, Belle?
No. I just said toast. Burnt bread, toast. I often add toast when I'm not feeling very well. But
Well, that proves
Oh,
a
you're
point.
right,
You know,
Anne.
am I all right?
yeah. Anne always gets stomach upsets, Ruth. So don't worry about it. Anything from you, Ruth?
That was Kate,
No,
I
I'm
think.
really stressed.
Oh, I don't know.
Good,
Well,
good.
I'm going to be
Anne,
I can preserve my coffee.
you're breaking up a little bit, but I can tell you're enjoying it. Right? Anything from
I'm
you, Goff?
Goff? Goff?
I don't know. Ruth just lost it.
Yeah,
Ruth, we can see you. We can't really hear you, but it's fine. We get the spirit. Goff, anything from you, darling?
he's asleep. He's asleep.
Anything from you, Dick?
No, nothing for me. Very interesting.
What about you, Judith?
Oh, I couldn't get bored of this. It's really interesting.
Ooh.
We got after the break. We got a bit of sadomasochism. So right. So talking about sadomasochism, Henry's still there, but he's not. And Pat. So what we'll do, we'll have a nice little break. I'll feed my animals and my sheep, my special needs sheeps. And anything from you, Pat? No.
Sorry, I was late. I had to get it together.
Oh, don't worry about it. What I might do is actually feed my sheep later and just do my chickens, my ducks, my goats, my Bramble. We got a goat called Bramble now. Bramble.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
Bramble, she's tall and she's red.
Ooh. Ooh.
Right. Okay. We'll have a little break. Talk amongst yourselves. Judith wants to tell you about a cricket match that she's just been to today. She thoroughly enjoyed herself. She got bowled over, and she went for a duck. And we'll be back at 8 34ish.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Everyone all right? Everyone all right? Cat all right?
Yes, fine. I'm gonna water my plants.
It's just so hot, isn't it? I know I shouldn't say it, but it's
I know.
very warm.
It's supposed to rain tomorrow, so
Yeah, I keep waiting for it, but I don't think it's gonna. I got my washing on the line. I keep worrying it's going to get rained on, but I don't think we're going to have the rain forecast.
Yeah, I've got 50 bales of hay to get under cover tonight. So yeah, wish me luck.
Well, they reckon it's coming from Scotland. The rain is coming from Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then it's going to go to England more on the easterly direction. So we might miss it if we're lucky. But I wouldn't listen to me. I wouldn't listen to me. Judith will get it.
Yes, probably. Well, we're just ever so slightly south of the Pennines, so we get all the weather.
Yeah, you will. You will. Well, yeah. That's the only reason I keep saying to my husband, you know, do you want to go back up north? And he said, no. He said he didn't want to go.
No.
So I think, oh well, you know. And then when I think of the winters, I think, oh no, we're here. We're quite sheltered, really. Even though we're on a hill, you know, it's the lowlands, you know, it's the low, what do they call them? The lowlands rather than the uplands.
the coastal.
Yeah, coastal.
Yeah.
It is a hill, but you know.
Yeah, you got a hill there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right then. But I'm gonna go get a cuppa.
Yeah, I'm gonna get one too.
All right, so you're going to do.
I just got my
Okay.
It's disappeared.
Can you see my washing? Can you see my washing on my hangers? No.
I've just seen your bloomers, Anne.
Can you see my washing on the washing?
Yeah, I can see those bloomers and that massive basque.
Mm.
Anne, I didn't know you wore basques. I know Judith wears basques. She sent me photographs of them.
Oh dear. Only if they're made of sourdough.
Oh, if they're made of sourdough.
Yeah. It's my new favourite fad after these history lectures, obviously.
You don't tell me you make edible underwear as well.
No, not underwear. This, but it is edible.
Right.
I'll get bored of it soon, don't worry. And I'll never want to see it or eat it again.
I decided, Anne said we should have some toast with some butter on. That's what I'm having now.
Oh, sourdough toast is nice.
I love toast. Well, I like to have a piece of toast before I go to bed. I don't eat, but, towards bedtime, but I like a piece of toast. It doesn't upset me at all. Well, it's been a bit sad here because my husband, that's his hometown, Southport, and
No.
you know, we were shocked, you know, and it's just gone from bad to worse. But I mean, just we haven't got any family there now, but we got friends, you know.
What, in Southport?
Hmm. Oh, you used to go there, didn't you, for the Liberal Party?
No, the Liberal Party used to be based in Southport, yeah.
No, I mean, it's just a big residential town. There's nothing there except houses, you know. It's like old houses, you know, lots of houses. But
It used to be the old haunt of Michael Meadowcroft, the old Liberal MP.
oh yeah, and my parents-in-law were Liberals.
Right. That was a nice munch of toast, and we're going to crack on. Oh, do you know what? This toast is so nice. I've just got to have a bit more. So, go on, Judith. Tell us a little bit more about your sourdough before we crack on.
Oh, I'm just getting it ready for its final proof. It takes so long. I started it on Monday.
So you make sourdough bread.
Yes,
Nice.
you spend days waiting for it to rise. Just hang on a second. I need to just cover it over.
Oh, well, it is nice though, and
Yeah.
it's expensive to buy.
Well, that's because it takes so long to make.
Hmm.
I love fresh bread.
Yeah. Oh, this is the first one. This is about my 6th attempt, and it's the first one that actually looks like the picture's supposed to.
Oh well, fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Oh, Carl would like some of that if you.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, yeah, I would.
if it works and I've cracked it, I'll bring you some down. It might not be as nice.
It would be too expensive to post, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, I'll put it in my bag.
It would cost a fortune.
Yeah.
Mm. Where about you live? South of the Pennines, just Yorkshire, is it?
It is, yeah. West Yorkshire.
West Yorkshire.
But I mean, Yorkshire's Yorkshire. It's all God's country.
I'm just trying to think where my husband's family came from, and I think it was Yorkshire.
On that note, Anne.
Considering they ended up in Lancashire, but they were Yorkshire.
I thought they were from Derbyshire. Never mind. Right, folks.
All the way up to Northumberland.
Oh yeah.
Right, folks. Let's crack on. So now, right. Let's get to the skull. Right, you can just see that there's damage. There it is. Nice. So as the peat was cleaned off the body in the laboratory, it became clear that Lindow man may have suffered a violent death. Now, was that incision in the skull made before or after death? So the injuries include a V-shaped 3.5 centimeter cut on top of his head, a possible laceration also at the back of the head. So that's 2. The ligature marks on the neck where a sinew cord was found, a possible wound on the right side of the neck. So that's 4 bits so far. A possible stab wound in the upper right chest. That's 5. And a broken neck, 6, and a fractured rib, 7. Now, the point is, was all of this caused whilst he was alive? And the other thing that somebody come up with as well, that even though his neck is hidden there. You can't really see it, but it's the sinew-looking marks around his neck. And then somebody said, could that have been actually a talk? And that was actually a fair point, right? Now, if you've got a rope around your neck, and it hasn't been tightened, or something around your neck that hasn't been tightened, after death, your body expands with gases.
Yeah.
And it might be that the marks around the neck were caused after death because your skin is going outwards, and the whatever's around your neck is restricting the expansion of your body. Think about it. So back to this blow on the top of the head. This was caused by a relatively blunt object. It had fractured the skull and driven fragments into the brain. Now, you would think that that would automatically cause death. But it didn't. Because when they examined that area there, it turned out that there was swelling along the edges of the wound, indicating that Lindow man had lived after being struck. Now, the blow, possibly from a small axe, would have caused unconsciousness, but the victim could have survived for several hours after that, or maybe have come back to life. Right? It's a phenomenon. Basically, you're in a coma, and just moments after you come out the coma, right? You have a brain trauma, and suddenly you splurt out stuff and then you die and the body shuts down. That's what may have happened here, right? But we don't know that. So the ligature marks on the neck were caused by tightening the sinew cord. But as this happened, did this cause his death, right? Or is it, as we've explained in the past, he was strangled to the point of death, and then the strangulation stopped and he was allowed to breathe again? Now, it needs to be confirmed which of the, right, there's three categories. What did he survive from that didn't cause death? What caused death? And actually, what was caused after death? So this, and one of the things that we mentioned earlier on, so obviously we're looking there, and you can see more clearly now the fox hair band on his humerus there. You can clearly see that there. And so as we look at the body, and you can't see any of these marks, but what could have been caused? The wound in the upper right chest and the laceration on the back of the skull, right? Because if you remember, there was damage to the skull and was a laceration to the back of the skull, two separate injuries. They may have been caused after death. The cut on the right of the neck may have been the result of the body becoming bloated, causing the skin to split. However, the straight edges to the wound suggest that it may have been caused by a sharp instrument such as a knife. The ligature marks on the neck may have occurred after death. So in other words, when I went to school, I remember being told this. He was, he strangled, but he was still alive, and then he was stabbed, and he was still alive, and so on, right? At some point, one of those injuries caused his death, and whether the garroting caused his death, when his neck broke, it did cause his death, right? So the breaking of his neck caused his death. right? So, and the other thing as well is that the marks around his neck may have actually been caused well before death, right? It may have been something else. Maybe something else. Maybe he had a rope around his neck and it was like an ornament. He had to cut it off. It left marks around his neck. I used to I went to Barry Boys Comprehensive School, and it used to be said about Barry Boys Comprehensive School, you either went mad or you committed suicide. In Richard and my case, we went mad, right? But there was this boy who went to comprehensive school. This is all true. He said, this was years later. He showed me his neck, and his neck was riddled with knife marks. He tried to slit his throat dozens of times, and every time he went up in Surrey Hospital. Right, bear with me on this, folks. Right now, if this guy, after I saw all those marks around his neck, and he had a fresh one around his neck, right? If all these marks had, say this guy was knocked down by a truck, right? And then the body was buried, right? Years later, when the body was excavated, if any of the flesh is still intact, would you say that he slit his own throat and committed suicide, or would you say they was knocked down by a truck? And this is the problem that we have with our friend Lindow man, right? We don't really know the full processing of his death, right? In many ways, any of these things could have caused his death. It's also said it's also said, right, and as you can see, I'm challenging some stuff here, right? It's also said that he was buried face down in the peat bog, right? But that doesn't explain how the limbs above his body show the bones rather than the flesh, meaning those parts of the body were exposed, right? So it's unlikely that he was placed into the bog face down, or may have been placed into the bog later on. His body's obviously been moved a few times. Now, again, thinking about the body and thinking about the whole process, many archaeologists have looked at the body, and the study of the bog bodies, including these found in Lindow Moss, has contributed to a wider understanding of well-preserved human remains, helping to develop new methods in analysis and investigation. The use of sophisticated techniques such as CT scans, yes, computer tomography, yes, CT scans that lots of us have had. I've had a CT scan. I'm sure some of you have had a CT scan in that weird machine that makes weird noises to get a scan of your body, right? They've done this with lots of bodies from bogs. These scans have allowed the reconstruction of the internal organs. Of the 27 bodies recovered from lowland raised Maya sites, such as Lindow Moss, they've really started to investigate these, and lots of these date from that period immediately after the death of Jesus Christ. So the physical evidence allows a general reconstruction of how Lindow man was killed, but the details are greatly debated still about what happened in the Iron Age. What evidence survives from the peat bogs is limited. And also, if you look at the body, right, had he been placed in a crouched form into the body, right? Or was his body flexed we don't know, right? Because, it's not all being put together. It's not all being reconstructed, right? And the other thing as well is there might be wounds on the bottom part of his body that also might indicate death. Because if you scarify a body, right, if you bloodlet a body, that's going to lead to death as well, right? If you bleed a body, that's going to lead to death. And it's going to be a far more pleasant way of dying that your body's going to be bloodlet. It might be slow, but it's a lot less painless, right? Now, tying in all of this as well, right? this idea of overkill for the bog body. And it's very extravagant, the way that this body is treated in death. Now, or is it? Or is it not? Depending on which way you look at it. Now, you can remember my lectures about the Neolithic cordwood enclosures. Heads were collected and they were put on stakes of loved ones, and these heads were faced out towards the landscape as you worked in the field. That was done in a loving way, right? This individual may have been treated in a loving way in death, even though, even though it looks sacrificial, even though there's cut marks to the body, lots of them, strangulation. He's been hit on the head, right? This is seen to be,
yeah, that could be to knock him out, so that whatever they did next, he
didn't feel pain.
Yeah.
That's one idea.
The thing is, this is triple death, right? It's the idea that you've died more than once, and it's quite an honor, right?
Realistic, isn't it? Because the medieval people talked about the triple fold death. It was
yes.
part of the mythology of the medieval crusades, I think.
And also the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Oh, was it?
Yeah. When you think about the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
And you think about the soul, and you think about Jesus, and you think about resurrection. So all of this, when we think about this, and the one thing is the number 3, right? So trying to scrap this together from the evidence that we've got, it's this idea of the number 3, the sacred number 3. Ronald Hutton, that wonderful extravagant Bristol professor, Ronald Hutton, has actually challenged the interpretation of sacrificial death. And Ronald Hutton would do this. He's come up with something else. He's actually argued that maybe the person was robbed of his clothing, right, and left to die. But that might be a bit too far-fetched, or it may be on the nail. So the jury about the body now, the jury about our man, the face that you're looking into, is out. The jury really is still out on these bodies, whether they were aristocrats, priests, criminals, outsiders, special people, whether they went willingly to their deaths or whether they were executed. But Lindow was a very remote place in those days, as it is today, an unlikely place for an ambush or a murder. So in other words, the person's gone willingly, as I will go willingly if I ever have Parkinson's or anything like that, right? I will go willingly to Switzerland. I've gone willingly to my death, right? My children were really stressed when I told them that, but that's my wish. But this might be in the same case as this individual, where I have a lethal injection. This guy died in the way that this person chose to die, right? So it's not unusual for any of these things to be said. Identifying his stomach contents as including the undigested remains of a partly burnt barley griddle cake of a kind used by the ancients for selected people victims of sacrifice. Such cakes were torn into fragments and placed in a sack, and obviously the bread, after which all candidates for sacrifice would withdraw a piece, with the one withdrawing the burnt piece being one who would willingly go to sacrifice. Lots of people have argued that this individual may have been a high-ranking individual in society, who was sacrificed in a last-ditch effort to call upon the aid of 3 native gods to stop a Roman offensive against the local people in that area in AD 60, which is also the time that the Romans were defeated by Boudicca, and we need to defeat Boudicca a few months later. One final thing I want to say about this before we do the other bits and pieces is this, that environmental and situation are the crucial factors that determine how corpses decay and how they've been preserved and how they've found. Heat slows the decay of corpses massively. It was feared that once Lindow Man was removed from that environment, his body would rapidly deteriorate. After rejecting methods that had been used to maintain the integrity of other bog bodies, such as pit tanning, on the Grobast Man, which took a year and a half, scientists settled on freeze drying the body. Our man himself, freeze drying it. That's how you can see him in a cabinet. In preparation, the body was covered in solution of 15% ethylene glycol and 65% water to prevent it becoming distorted. The body was then frozen solid, and the ice vaporized to ensure Lindow Man did not shrink. Afterwards, Lindow Man was put in a specially constructed display case to control the environment at a temperature of 20 degrees C and the humidity at 55 degrees. The body itself, Lindow Man, can be seen at Manchester occasionally. And the body is seen out and about, and it's a wonderful find. But finally, that man and you and I, critics have complained that by museum display of the remains, the body of Lindow Man has been objectified, becomes an artifact rather than a human being, rather than treated with the respect due to the death. This is part of a wider discussion about the scientific treatment of human remains, and museum researchers and archaeologists using them as information sources or for us to display them in museums. That's the last word on Lindow Man, and we've got some other bits and pieces that I want to do now, right? So there we go, and obviously that's where we have it. But what I want us to do is I want us to look at. Oh, by the way, I didn't do this last night. Look at that. Can you remember that lecture when we looked at the Gudenstrup cauldron from Denmark, and there was a guy with a raven on their helmet?
Yeah.
And ravens on a helmet, they're illustrated on that cauldron, right? But they are actually real because this is actually being found. So, you could think, oh, this is fantasies, but it's not. People did have, can you imagine this thing? Imagine, the person turning around, it'd be like propeller belt or whatever. But these things do exist. Anyway, so what we're going to do finally, so we're going to look at the bird lip mirror, right? So the last bits are really short, but what I felt last night was that, we've just been looking at bodies and burials and things like that. So I thought, right, let's just let's look at this, right? And I'm just going to get my notes up. And right. So what was said last week, what was said last night was that one of them said, oh, they had to leave early. And they said, oh, what we do it next? And I said, we're doing a bird lip mirror. And they said, oh, I can look that up on the internet. And I said, yeah. So I thought, right, yeah. We're not going to talk much about the bird lip mirror, but we'll talk about the other mirror, right? Now, the bird lip mirror is one of a small number of bronze mirrors surviving on this planet. We've got bronze mirrors from this period in the Iron Age in China, all the way over to Europe. And opinions differ on the identity and even the gender of the owner. So this was found by the bird lip mirror was found by complete and utter accident in 1879. And look how beautiful that is. And if we look, hang on, if we look, it's almost as if it should be, it's part of a chain, and that handle can move, but it doesn't. It's all made of bronze, right? But what you've got is that sort of glacis pottery green paste there as well, on this bronze mirror. So the other side is extensively polished, right? So in 1879, workmen discovered 3 skeletons, right? And the one that was closest to this mirror was a female in a quarry between Crickley and Birdlip, overlooking the Vale of Gloucester. With the bones were some amazing Iron Age artifacts. The most important object is a handheld mirror, i.e. this, not that one, this handheld mirror. The front of this was originally highly polished for reflection, but the rear is decorated with flowing patterns worked into the metal, La-10 of the Celtic art form for the lights of Switzerland. This is one of the finest examples of this art in Britain that is not on display in the British Museum. This is on display in the Cheltenham Museum. So the smaller items are also remarkable. They found 2 bronze bowls with this as well. Again, I'm leaving this to you for you guys to research. And the stylized face of a bird or animal seen in a silver gilt brooch. And a bronze knife handle is shaped as the head of a ox. There is also a bead necklace of amber, obviously from the Baltic. But listen to this. One of the beads that was found came from China.
What?
Came in as a trade item all the way from China. So if you want to look at the Birdlip site and the excavation, the Birdlip grave group, look that up. And then finally, what we've got is another mirror. In fact, one of 2. Now, we found 60 of these mirrors across the world, but obviously the world is a big place, and you know, we've got this. Lots of them are broken, and you know, and this one itself, this Iron Age bronze mirror from Didcot, Oxfordshire, the disc itself, 18.5 centimeters across, and obviously from top to bottom, 17.5, and the total length is close on that length of the old school ruler that we used to have, 27.5 centimeters. Absolutely beautiful item, and known as the Pegston mirror. There's 2 of them actually. So looking at this evocative in the Oxfordshire Museum, this mirror, not as good as the Birdlip one, but quite amazing. This mirror was found by a metal detector enthusiast in 2007, a decorated mirror, and we know of 50, well, we know of 60 of them. I don't know why the figure's got 50. We know of 60 of them, and only 18 on the planet the Earth are actually intact, right? Like this. So, you know, we're looking at 2 examples today. And this itself probably dates roughly 100 years before the birth of Christ. La-10 style pattern again, which has been inscribed into the back. In Iron Age times, mirrors would have been prestigious items owned by only a few people. And just think about it as well, not just for looking into the mirrors, right? They're buried with individuals, right? And just think, Alice in Looking Glass, you bury somebody with a mirror, and then in life you've got a mirror. So you look and communicate into that mirror with the person that's underground again. Alice looking through the looking glass. So again, these wonderful, beautiful objects. In many cultures, mirrors are magical objects. When you look, for example, at ancient Egypt, what you do see is in ancient Egypt, you see the preparation of dead underground, right? Mummification underground, right? And instead of using, you know, lanterns and oil or whatever, right, which would be a fire risk with all the oils underground, you use mirrors. It's mirror light. And
Mm.
just think, you basically have a mirror that's hit by the sun, and then you have another mirror at another angle, another mirror at another angle, going down to the mirrors down below. And then you have a load of mirrors down below, and the whole thing underground's lit up. And this is mirror light, right? And when you think about it, you look into water on a lake, and you can see a reflection, right? And somebody said, when did they invent these mirrors? And I'm saying, well, human beings knew of mirrors when they first looked at their reflection in water, right? We've always had mirrors, right? As you know, monkeys look at their reflection in water. So mirrors are massively important. A portal to another world, you could think. Some experts believe this may well have been the case in Iron Age society. Mirrors may be connected with fortune telling or shamanic activity. While these mirrors are casual finds, obviously we're finding one at Birdlip, which was actually buried with somebody. Are they associated clearly with death? These mirrors that have been found in burials normally have the reflective side towards the person's face. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So the mirror, your face is looking at the mirror in death, right?
Yeah.
And you can always communicate. So the Pegston mirror itself, you know, is an amazing artifact. And what we've got, the Pegston mirror is about 40 miles away from the area of South Oxfordshire, where it's thought that the Oxford mirror was found as well. So we've got these wonderful mirrors. Experts agree when we look at this. Look at that there, absolutely beautiful. Experts agree that, you know, metallurgically, and obviously this is worn down, but metallurgically, these are very very highly skilled. And the way you produce these is by casting from a molten bronze. You just pour the molten bronze onto a sandy base, maybe into a loose mold, right? And then you hammer it to make it thinner and flatter, right? The annealing process, right? And then you would go through the same process to polish it and give reflection on the other side. So we are left to ask what the implications are about these mirrors, these wonderful mirrors in the Iron Age. And as I got to the end last week, I said, as I'm getting to the end this week now, I made this statement, and it's very true. Many times when I've put videos online about the Roman era, I always get, oh, you're obsessed with the Romans, you know, you believe that the Romans brought culture to this country, yeah, you believe this and that, and they can't be, that they're so far away from what I believe. I believe this, right? That if the Roman era civilization, the Romans had never invaded Britain properly. There was influence from the continent, but they never invaded Britain properly. Right? Say that happened, we would still be here today, talking on the internet. 1066, the 14th of October, would have happened. The Norman invasion would have happened anyway, right? And what I'm trying to say is we didn't need the Romans to give us this technology because we already had it. And also, it's a powerful thing for me to say that. And also, when you look at Scandinavia, look at the Scandinavians. They didn't have much contact with the Roman world either. And they went all the way around the world to Greenland, Iceland, on their ships, Ireland, Scotland, Europe. They didn't need the Romans, and nor did we. And when you look at it, most of Roman civilization is based on everybody else's civilization. And ours was not based on Roman civilization at all. Next week, we're going to be looking at the wonderful site, a wonderful site in Orkney. It's about time I brought the Orcadians to bear on the archaeology. Next week, what I might do is have an update on the Nessa Brodgar excavations, and we're going to call it a day. So Birdlip on the map near Cheltenham, and that's where we started. Right, so we're going to call it a day now. So, and right, here we go. Did you, Anne?
I went to Birdlip, and there's a lovely pub there called the George, which we stayed at with rooms, nice rooms, and only about 10-minute walk. There's an Iron Age hill fort, and probably where this lady was found, you know.
Probably associated or a link with it. Probably, yes. Yeah, exactly.
And
exactly.
the actual mirrors in where did I say it was? The Cotswold?
Cheltenham.
Oh, is it?
Cheltenham Museum, yeah.
Oh, right.
It's not in
Gloucester.
Cirencester, no.
It's in Gloucester Museum.
Well, all I got in my notes is Cheltenham. It don't matter around wherever it is.
No, but it's a really nice trip.
Yes. I'm sure Goff will go out by train, right? And he will be there, right? I'm just reading my notes here. And it does I stand corrected. It does actually say Gloucester Museum.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering where I got Cheltenham from. But don't worry about it. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's probably called the Cheltenham Museum in Gloucester. I don't know. Anyway, what we're going to do. Henry's back. Did he miss anything? I missed a few bits and pieces. Right. Okay then. Right. Let's do Ruth. Anything you want to say, Ruth?
Very interesting. Really enjoyed it.
Good. Right. Next, we're going to do Henry. Anything you'd like to say, lovely?
No, sorry, I missed a fair chunk, but I caught the back end of it, so that was good.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Right. Okay then. Met Hugh at Bonneville Carter. Right. Anyway, who are we going to do next? Judith.
No, nothing to add. It's really, really interesting, and as usual, a little bit sad.
Yeah.
But that's life. That's life.
Yeah, it is.
That's life. Anyway, thanks for that, Judith.
He's becoming a forensic archaeologist, I think.
I am. I'm there, and this is exactly what we're doing in a live show next year. Exactly. Thank you, Anne. Anything else from you, Anne?
No, that's all. Thank you. Yeah, nice.
Okay. Right, so we're going to do Goff and then Pat and Richard. Right, anything from you, Goff? Oh, you're going now, Ruth. Track, Ruth.
Bye, Ruth.
Bye, Ruth. See you soon. Anything from you? Good night, Ruth. Anything from you, Goff?
Yeah, wondering about the Lindow man. Because it was found in the bog, would his body have been, when it was found, would it be different from Otzi in the Alps, or would it have been the same sort of deterioration and stuff?
Yeah, there is talk of deterioration on the body, but the difference is with Otzi, it's Otzi's been mummified via ice, and put it this way, Otzi would have survived better, right, if he had been treated better from the offset, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's the same. Obviously, as soon as oxygen gets to these things, it starts to deteriorate. When Heinrich Schliemann was excavating at Mycenae, I think it was in 1876, he said that as he lifted a stone and took off the golden mask, he could look into the face of Agamemnon. And there was photography back then in 1876, and they basically, by the time they set up the camera, the flesh on the face was gone. It just gone. So yeah, and could you imagine it? That would have been really weird. The photograph would have, you had to stand for X amount of time for the negative. You wouldn't have got the image anyway. So
spooky. Yeah. Okay. That's all I say. Yeah. Apart from I'm wondering whether the hotel Anne stayed in had ensuite rooms.
It's called the George.
Oh, the George, yes. Has it got ensuite rooms?
Yes.
Okay, a bar?
Yes. Oh, it's you know, it's a chain.
Oh, right, okay.
It's really nice. It's a really nice
I'll have
place.
to remember that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Adequate,
No,
you
no
know.
other questions, Carl.
Greens. Is there something greeny?
Okay, you gotta say you set her off now. Garth, can I intervene on this? Do they provide a chain for the bedroom? Right, let's move on. Pat.
Yes, I really enjoyed it. Sorry I was late. What time do you start on Wednesday? I've gotten confused.
Well, basically what it is, basically what's happening now, we're doing the old Barry class at 6:45, right? And then what we're doing, you guys are joining at 7:15. Then we're doing this lecture properly by at 7:30. So if you just want to do 7:30 to now, then that's what we're doing. But if you want to catch a little bit of the other stuff, then you're welcome to join a bit early.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, my
That's-
pleasure. I don't think you missed much. All right, and finally, Dickie, anything you want to say before we finish?
Oh, really interesting subject, you know.
The subjects, it's good. We
Yeah.
did quite a bit. We
Yeah,
did quite a
no,
bit.
it is strange
Okay.
to be looking at a body that's old, you know. So very interesting.
It's still with us. It's still with us. Thank you for that. Anyone else want to say anything else? Richard, Anne, Goff, Pat, Henry, and Judith. Anyone else? Okay.
Good night.
Well, we'll be
Good
back
night and have a
next
good
week,
week.
and we've got lots of really exciting things next week. So I'll see you then. Thank you for your continued support. I'll see you next Wednesday. You know the
Thank
times.
you.
Thank you, guys. No,
Bye,
diolch yn fawr
everyone.
i chi.
Bye.
Good
Goff,
night.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Pat,
So
Judith,
long.
Henry, Richard. No, diolch. So long.
So long.
So long. I'm gonna get the hay in now. Night, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So don't forget, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. Any donations, really, really grateful, appreciated. I know things are hard at this minute. But I always appreciate any contributions that anyone makes. And you can send you can actually send donations directly on YouTube. Actually, you can. There's a pound sign thing there somewhere, and you can send through donations. Anyway, so I'm going to call it a day now. I've got to go. And here we go. Sorry. Oh, this is in the chat box. Sorry. RAF just landed. Will have to go. Back now. Did I miss any good bits? Back now. Did I miss any good bits? And back now. Did I miss any good bits? Okay, sorry, RAF. And back now. Did I miss any good bits? And that's in the chat box. That's all we've got. Okay. Diolch yn fawr i chi. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for your continued support. And I'll see you next Tuesday at 7:30 or next week at Wednesday at 6:45. And it's gone pretty well. We got a double whammy on a Wednesday. Diolch yn fawr i chi.